Welcome to the second video of the series. On the first one we covered basic macro concepts, which should guide you on how to approach maps in general from capture phase to where to fight. It is essential to understand these concepts because as you get better, you will begin to climb the ladder and you'll be facing stronger players. The main theme of this video will be about obtaining small advantages throughout the match. We will look into openings, tech-up timings, tactics, infantry positioning and how to close out a game. Very quickly you will start to realize what a complex game this is, which in turn makes it such a great game. A lot of concepts here are very situational. They will depend a lot on the map, the CO, but mainly just the overall state of the match. So it will be up to you to evaluate and make a decision. In the last video I said that tanks, copters and anti-airs, plus rearguns and fog, were pretty much all you needed to win. At a certain point it will be important for you to start getting familiar on how to use other units effectively. Getting good with artillery is key, and they probably deserve a video on its own. You don't have to use artillery, but I recommend to start experimenting with them. You can use an arty to point at an enemy city so that your opponent has to move or get blasted. Use it to cover your capturing infantry, or use it to defend your own cities safely from afar. The more units an arty is surrounded by, the stronger the arty will be. We all know how tricky it can be to position artillery properly to avoid your opponent from easily breaking through and destroying the artillery. So take your time to plan how you will position it and the surrounding units. Arties excel at putting pressure and creating threats. A well-defended artillery can slowly creep forward and take control of a whole area. Usually, you want to use artillery on your strong side instead of your weak side, because it is where you'll have the most units. So in 3 base maps, make it from your 2 base side and push forward. And from your 1 base side, make mostly tanks. In base light, it's harder to use them effectively because you have less units. And in mixed base, it can get tricky since there are a lot of 1 base areas, but you should be fine making one of them on your 2 base area and pushing with it wherever your strong side is. The chokier the area of a map is, the stronger the artillery will be, and the more open it is, the more vulnerable it will be to simply tanks. So try to use terrain to your advantage. Just remember that arties have very poor mobility, so they are very bad at front switching and adapting. They excel at pushing in one place slowly in one direction. So if you prefer to have mobility and adaptability, you will probably be better off just by building tank instead. Mechs in theory are very good since they can deal the same damage as a tank for half the cost, but their major setback is their slow movement of only 2 tiles. So they end up relying on transports to get to the front lines. This means that they are most viable on maps where you have pre-deployed transports to ferry them around, or on maps where a base is very close to the front lines, so that a mech can be working in just 1 or 2 turns. You pretty much want to think of them as cheap, one-shot artillery. You usually want them overlapping your vehicles or infantry behind the front line to avoid being struck by enemy infantry. You want your mechs to be shooting at vehicles and not infantry. Taking up means to buy more expensive units, such as medium tanks, neo tanks and bombers. Whenever you do this, you are taking a risk, which is building 1 vehicle instead of 2 or 3 that turn. For example, buying a neo tank and 2 infantry instead of 2 tanks, 1 copter and 1 infantry. Meaning that you will have less vehicles reinforcing the front lines in a few turns in exchange for 1 heavy hitting unit. This doesn't mean that taking up is bad, it's just a reminder of what you're giving up by taking this decision. In my opinion, teched up units work similarly to artillery in that they become stronger and stronger the more units they have around it. Let's look at some scenarios where you should consider taking up. If unit count starts to build up a lot and you are reaching the unit limit, then I'd suggest taking up if you haven't already. So you have a more efficient use of your remaining available unit space. And if unit count is this high, there are probably big walls of units where tech-ups strive in due to their wall-breaking capacity. If you see your opponent building a tech-up unit, then that can also be a good time to tech up yourself in response. Like seeing a neo tank and then buying your own neo tank or a bomber in response. Certain COs will want to tech up faster and more often than other COs. Andy will want to tech up as early as possible since killing his medium tanks can become really tough with only copters and tanks. And if it's only injured but not killed, that means he will gain a lot of charge to then use hyper upgrade and have an almost brand new medium tank. Sturm also usually wants to tech up earlier since his regular tanks don't deal too much damage. And he will want to mix in more indirects and tech up units to be able to effectively 2-hit KO other units while also being really effective walls with his increased defense stats. In a base rush scenario, if your one base is being highly pressured and outnumbered by tanks, a medium tank might work as the perfect panic buy button, where it can deter those tanks. But just keep in mind that if your opponent also has copters and especially artillery supporting those tanks, buying a medium tank will not have the same effect. At that point, you will likely want to just win faster on your strong side of the map and take it as a race to see who can take each other's base faster. In high funds, you will be taking up much quicker, but it doesn't mean you won't need small vehicles. When to take up in high funds is very map dependent. And if you watch high level players, they tend to have a lot of small vehicles and then add some take-up units to support. The larger the fronts on a map will probably mean that you will need more small vehicles to be able to cover more ground and different fronts at the same time. So the timing on taking up can become a bit tricky. All of the previous scenarios apply to high funds as well, and taking up will mean that you are heavily investing on that area, so do so with a plan in mind. I recommend making medium tanks exclusively in standard. They are great panic buy buttons to shut down tank pressure on your weak side, and they tend to have a lot of use on mixed base maps where the fronts are super close to the bases, allowing medium tanks to jump right into the action in just 1 or 2 turns. Neo tanks are probably the best teched up units in FOG. Maps are bigger, they are faster than medium tanks, they are more durable, and they are able to one-shot most land units, which can open up some interesting engagements for your other units. They also see a lot of use in standard and especially in high funds. Bombers are my personal favorite unit. They can one-shot almost any unit. They are super fast and they fly over all terrain. They work as a very effective response to neo tanks, but their biggest setback is that they are vulnerable to anti-airs, so they require extra care. In my experience, bombers are the strongest in standard and high funds, since you can see where your opponent's anti-airs are and position your bomber more effectively. In FOG, they are also strong, but mostly as an anti-neo tank unit. Just make sure that when you send your bomber in to take out the neo tank, try to surround the bomber with units so that it doesn't get shot down by an anti-air next turn. Openings are the very first or first few vehicles you make in a match. These will dictate where and what kinds of fight will start to take place on the map. If an opener is strong enough and not countered enough, it can determine the fate of the match. So having good openers becomes vital. A great way of learning what openers are good or generally used on a map is by checking replays of higher level players. You can also learn what are some efficient capture phase routes from these replays. You can quite literally copy capture phases from high level players. I've done it multiple times and I still do it sometimes. Usually you want to go for the fastest income and delay the comm tower until engagements start, since these provide no income. But this is not always the case. Sometimes the funding allows you to skip a specific city to reach a further out city faster without delaying your vehicle deployment. You can use the move planner to plan and test these out, or simply see if you spot something like this from a higher level player that had success with it and just copy it. Let's talk about some common opening builds. The simplest and safest opener in standard is simply tank. Some maps will have other very good openers, such as recon, artillery, or copter, but they are very map dependent. These non-tank openers on standard usually have to be played very sharp to be effective, so make sure you know what you're going to do with it and in what part of the map, or else you might just get crushed by a stream of enemy tanks. In FOG, it is more common and safer to have non-tank openings. For example, transport openers become very viable because FOG maps are bigger and because you can simply get away with it since it's hidden in the fog. The most common openers in FOG are tank, which has a stronger army approach where you can start a fight and win if you have a tank chain and your opponent had a non-tank opener. Transport, which is a more economic approach, where you want to exploit the boosts and movement to speed up as many captures as possible, potentially even capturing contested cities before your opponent's units arrive there. Recon, which has an economic harassment approach, where you want to attack enemy infantry and interrupt captures, with the objective of setting back your opponent's economy. This one also provides valuable intel, since you'll most likely spot what opening your opponent went for. In theory, they work as a triangle where one opening beats the other, but in practice it doesn't always work like that. You can plan how far you can get away with your opening before being countered. Like for example, which cities your day 3 recon can be harassing before the earliest tank from your opponent arrives there. In high funds, opening with transport is very common and usually very rewarding since it's very hard to punish, except on the mixed based maps where you probably want to open with tank. Having good openings can get very complex very fast, so it is okay to start off simple and safe. like just opening with tank and keeping a tank chain, but eventually you want to start evaluating other openers, either by studying higher level players' matches or by trying out what works and what doesn't. An effective and unanswered opener can give you a very strong early advantage. In this game, when players talk about tactics, they refer to how engagements are taken. You want to start making sure you're getting the best possible engagements out of a battle. Sometimes this means knowing when and when not to take a fight. Let's look at a few tips. Ideally, you want to use your vehicles to strike at vehicles and not infantry. If you take a fight where all your vehicles take out only enemy infantry, but next turn your opponent uses their vehicles to take out all of your vehicles, then that was a terrible engagement. So, try to use infantry to clear out enemy infantry first to allow your vehicles to strike onto enemy vehicles. You also want to minimize overkills. For example, try to use your own injured units to clear out enemy injured units, like using a 5 HP tank to clear out a 2 HP tank, so that your 10 HP tanks can attack at other 10 HP enemy vehicles, maximizing the value you are dealing. If possible, you can also minimize the counter-attack damage you received. With land units, you can do this by making good use of terrain defense. A good one is when needing 2 units to clear out one, start with a unit that will receive the least amount of or no counter-attack damage at all. For example, taking out an infantry with first a recon and then an infantry, or taking out a tank with first a copter and then a tank. Or if you have indirects like artillery, shoot with it first and then finish off the unit with another direct unit. Whenever you are planning to attack with a group of units, try to start attacking with the farthest units first, and as you clear the way, your units closer to the enemy will have room to keep attacking. This is essential to have an effective wall break to destroy an artillery, and very important in fog, where as you send units in, you will get vision of what lies ahead, so you can take a better decision of how to follow up the attack. Air units such as B-copters and bombers are very strong, but they are either unkillable or extremely fragile. This will depend on your opponent's air defenses. If player A has air units and player B has no air defenses at all, then player A has Air Superiority, which means that they can go crazy with their air units without retaliation. The most common air defenses are anti-airs and copters. In standard and high funds, you have perfect intel, so take a close look at your opponent's army and check if you have or can achieve air superiority this very turn. In fog, it's a bit trickier since you don't know how many anti-airs or copters your opponent has hidden in the fog, but if you take out a few copters and anti-airs on one turn, then you can be pretty certain that they have no air defenses, at least for a while. This is why air units are slightly stronger in standard and high funds, because you know exactly where and how many air defense units they have. If you're able to find moments of air superiority, exploit them as much as you can and gain advantages. This will likely only last about 1 or 2 turns as enemy reinforcements arrive, so make good use of it. Low HP units are still very much useful. You can retreat them, heal them back on cities, use them as blockers, or save them at low HP and you might just find a moment to sack them in order to enable an important wall break. Sometimes you only have one tile to attack from, so using a 4 HP infantry against a 10 HP infantry will leave it at 8 HP while your infantry gets destroyed by the counterattack, which means the tile is cleared for you to send in a tank to finish off the 8 HP infantry, enabling further attacks. After having a really good engagement, ideally you will have full HP infantry ready to start capturing properties in that area. Now, you need to remember that infantry are slow. They only move 3 tiles per turn, so making sure they are positioned correctly is key. If you're trying to pressure an area, if you want to take over an enemy city, make sure you have full HP infantry 3 tiles away from it. If it's a standard or high funds match, and your opponent doesn't realize or respect it, then it's a free city flip for you. If they invest units to defend it, you are forcing a reaction from them and gaining control from the game, which is good. And if you happen to have a really good wall break or engagement, then you can follow it up with starting a capture, leaving your opponent almost no choice but to concede you the city. Infantry position is also key on the defensive. If your opponent has a single infantry 1 turn away from your city, then having your own infantry 4 tiles away from that city is a good enough defense to interrupt and stop the cap. This will force your opponent to decide on whether to send more army to support that capture, which at the same time can mean less army somewhere else. In fog, since you can't see your opponent's infantry, what you can do to defend your cities is to make sure to always have an infantry in range of them, which can mean, on your weak side, quite literally having a few lonely infantry hiding in the fog for multiple turns just in case your opponent tries to sneakily start a capture. As you gain experience playing Advanced Wars, you will notice that most, if not all, fighting sparks from trying to capture or deny captures, which is one of the main reasons why Kindle is consistently strong in her tier. So having good management of where your infantry are and at the same time of where your opponent's infantry becomes vital. In summary, have full HP infantry pointing at enemy cities so that they're ready to start a capture if the opportunity presents itself, and keep close attention to what cities of yours are threatened by enemy infantry so you can have your own infantry ready to pounce. If you haven't been using the move planner yet, I strongly suggest that you do. It is an incredibly powerful tool. You will be able to apply all of these concepts much more effectively with it. Use it to simulate a battle, you can check how to use your units in an attack, look for the most positive engagement, which units you can attack and from which tiles. You can use it to simulate your entire turn, checking different alternatives, until you find one that you are satisfied with, and then you copy it in the official match itself. You can use it to plan out a capture phase and an opening by checking when you would get enough funds for your first vehicle. There's so much you can do with it. The default move planner of the site is okay-ish, so I very strongly suggest that you download Saltor's extension for the move planner, which I will link in the description. It makes it look and work so much better. It shows units movement and provides so many more useful tools. It definitely is a must in my opinion. It is important to start being aware of the power charges, both yours and of your opponent. You want to avoid being completely destroyed by a power next turn, when it could have been easily avoided with a few tweaks on how you position your units. Once engagements begin, you need to start checking the power charges at the start of your turn. Is your power fully charged? Try to see what you can gain from using it this turn. Maybe your power isn't ready, but it's close, so check if after a few engagements you'd be able to get your power mid-turn. You can apply the same to your opponent. If you have planned a turn with really good engagements, check if they will get their power and how much damage it will do to you. Is the end result of these engagements still favorable to you? Great, go ahead. If it isn't, then maybe plan a different turn with less engagements or be more selective of which fights you're going to take. Basically, you want to start making better use of your powers by knowing when they would become active, and you want to be prepared for your opponent's powers to avoid getting destroyed by them. One of the best tools of the move planner is to bait the missile powers of Rachel, Sturm, and Bombalt. You can plan out your turn, then select the missile power that you will most likely get hit by next turn, and it will show you exactly where it will land. Use this to plan an effective turn while also baiting the missile to minimize the damage. It's important to understand how the missiles assign their targets for you to be able to get creative with baits. So for this, I recommend reading the wiki of the site, where it explains each of them in great detail. Having a good, well-balanced army composition can be a very tricky task. Games can get messy, and usually you won't have the time to sit back and build up your ideal army. What you can do is to avoid having a very one-sided army. For example, having lots of infantry but no vehicles, or having lots of vehicles but no infantry. The two most common units that tend to be out of balance are infantry and anti-airs, because as fights take place, spamming B-copters and tanks is very common. So make sure to take a close look at your infantry and anti-air count every turn. Being low on infantry numbers is one of the most dangerous things in this game. On your weak side, it means that you'll have to use vehicles to clear out infantry or stop captures. On your strong side, it means that you won't be able to capture anything, so you won't be able to capitalize from winning fights. A very common scenario is to be building tanks every single turn on your weak side in a 3-base map, or on one of your 1-base sides in a mixed base map. You might find yourself doing this to avoid getting overrun, but you will have no infantry in that area to reclaim cities when you've pushed the enemy back. Being low on anti-air isn't necessarily bad, it really depends on the state of the match. Like, if there's no airports on the map, then there's no need to make anti-airs. But most maps do have airports, so having anti-airs at certain times can be crucial. You can sometimes get away with dealing with copters with your own copters, but when armies build up, you will find that copter versus copter sometimes is not enough, and you will be glad to have a few anti-airs to one-shot copters instead. Just make sure to take care of your anti-air as much as possible. Remember that if you have no anti-air, then you might be at risk of granting your opponent air superiority. My biggest advice here is to take your time when deciding what units to build. Before auto-clicking tanks and copters, look at the board. Look at your army, look at your opponent's army, look at the reinforcements, and ask yourself, am I low on infantry? Am I low on anti-air? Can I get away with building an infantry instead of a tank on my weak side this turn? What you build this turn will matter a lot in a few turns. On some maps, base trading is possible and sometimes common. But bases are extremely resilient, so trying to take over them can become a very difficult task. If a base rush fails, it could potentially determine the fate of the match, so it is important to know if you'll be able to achieve this. Usually, bases that can be rushed will be lone one base, so stay away from two base areas. If a one base has an airport, it will make it more difficult, and you should see if you could rush the airport first, and then the base. Here's another example of just looking at higher level replays to identify if and which bases can be rushed. To rush a base, you want to have a strong, balanced army. Tanks and infantry only are not going to cut it, since a medium tank buy will shut that down. So you will need to add artillery. One artillery for this is the very bare minimum, and it has to be perfectly protected. You can try going for 2 or 3 artillery instead to ensure the base rush. Copters are also a great addition, since if they have no air defense, they will work as perfect blockers, and they can also help out dealing with tech-up units. You can also use neo-tanks or bombers to help rush a base. There are a few ways that the game will decide if you are the winner of the match. If you capture your opponent's HQ, or if you destroy all of your opponent's units. In Global League there is also a capture limit, so if you reach that number of captures you win. And in live games and tournament matches there will usually be a day limit, so whoever owns the most properties by then wins. Now, ideally we want to avoid taking it to these limits, right? So we want to push our advantages so far that our opponent simply resigns. And usually players do resign when they feel like their position is completely lost, and save us the trouble of dragging the game out to the tedious stage of simply cleaning up the map that some of us will remember from playing the campaign. So how do we close out a match? Well, it depends, but you can use all of the concepts in this video to chip away at your opponent's army, slowly gaining advantages. Try to have increasingly higher unit count, higher unit value, and higher income. Identify all of the contested cities on the map. Once you have all of them on one side, then swing sideways with your army to get at the ones on the other side. Remember, there's no need to keep pushing deeper. What you want to avoid is having a lead, getting overconfident and impatient, and throwing the game by massively overextending. So identify your advantages, actively try to maintain them, if possible try to keep increasing them, and as a last resort, go for the finishing blow with an HQ cap, capture limit, or day limit. One of the best ways to learn if your decision making was correct or not is by watching the replay of your own matches once they have finished, most importantly the ones you have lost in. Skill level here can have a very wide range, and you might even get matched against very high level players every now and then, which can be scary the first time, but I strongly suggest to take these as a learning experience. Try to play against higher ranked players to the very best you can, and if you lose, you can ask them or other players to review the game for feedback, to understand where you might have gone wrong, and why your opponent made the decisions they made. Ideally, you will gather this info like tools to be used in your next matches when the time is right. The Advanced Wars by Web Discord server is a great place for this, where most of the players hang around, including a lot of the top players, and there will always be some players willing to review your games and give feedback. I don't think many competitive games have this, so make good use of it. In the beginner tips, I suggested picking any CO within the tier. Now, at this level, I'd say it's still fine to pick any CO within the tier, but you might find more success with COs that thrive in brawly scenarios. COs like Adder, Kindle, Max, and Bomball that have strong and easy to use day-to-day powers. But it really is fine picking whichever CO you want within the tier. Getting experience with them all is very helpful. Another thing you can do is check what COs are most picked on a map, and specifically look at what COs higher level players are picking. We have covered a lot of concepts here. Hopefully they will help you get better results from battles and grant you the victory. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video, which is advanced tips. Bye bye.